On day 2 of the IAA with the Last Mile Challenge. Welcome to all of you. If you're standing in the back, there's plenty of free seats. Feel free to grab one. If you're joining us on the web stream, welcome. We're really happy to have you with us. This panel is going to be moderated by the Managing Director and Partner at BCG, Peter Wiedenhoff. I'd like to invite him and all of his panelists to the main stage for a discussion on the Last Mile Challenge. Welcome.
A warm welcome to the Last Mile Challenge panel. My name is Peter Wiedenhoff, Managing Director Partner at BCG. I'm heading BCG's commercial vehicles business in Europe, Middle East, and South America, and I'm happy to moderate the panel today. Let me quickly introduce our strong panelists that we have on stage. We have Andreas Adam, who is heading the vehicle line ID bus at Volkswagen Nutzfahrzeuge here in Hanover. We have Jan Christie, who is the partner at What 3 Words. We have Tom Elvidge, who is the EVP of Vehicle Platforms at Arrival. And we have Clemens Koebele, who is the General Manager at Gorillas in Germany. And also warm welcome to Sebastian Kempf, who is the Head of Department Fleet at DPHDL Group in Germany. So, welcome to the section to maybe give a view on the Last Mile Challenge. So what is the Last Mile Challenge about? I would like to share a bit of a broader perspective and have just 4 slides for that. And let's look at it from 3 angles, which we believe the last mile is really taking a strong and growing development in the future. The first one, of course, is the expected growth of e-commerce. So we expect that e-commerce overall will grow by more than 100% until the end of the decade, 130%, which of course leads to a larger number of vehicles being on the road. The second element, the second lens, is the ongoing electrification in terms of sustainability in the market. We believe that 60% of the light vehicles which will be sold by 2030 will be fully electric. Also, as you can see on the IAA and the different booths and halls right now here in Hanover. And then the third lens is actually all of the financial activities and investment activities in the space. So only in 2020, there have been about $23 billion investments and funding in startups and technology around new modes of transport. So let's have a very quick view at that, at those three lenses. So looking at the overall spending, we expect the spending on e-commerce to rise from about $5 billion to $11.4 billion by the end of the decade. That translates automatically into a higher number of vehicles being on the road. It's not one-to-one, there is efficiencies to be used, but it will be at least in the range of 30+% more vehicles, which leads to more CO2 emissions, which leads to more congestions in the cities. And that's why, of course, OEMs, but also cities and fleet operators are looking into how to improve and solve that challenge. Electrification, I said the current latest forecast is about 60% of light vehicles will be electric by 2030. In parallel, we see the strong regulations by cities and municipalities. For example, there is already a bunch of cities that plan to be emission-free and ban ICE vehicles by 2030. For example, this is Paris, this is Amsterdam, and this is also Lausanne. I'm just giving some examples. And the final lens, transport innovation. I mean, while we always see light commercial vehicles as we know them on the roads by 2030, there is lots of funding and activities around smaller AV delivery robots, about the cargo bikes, of course, about special purpose vehicles, and also about drones that can take some part of the last mile delivery in the future. So that is the view at, I would say, the 3 lenses in the overall challenge in last mile during the next 10 years. But looking at the panel and at more, I would say, a bit operational view, and maybe we can start the discussion by addressing Clemens. What do you perceive today as being the challenge when it comes to delivery, and what is the key point that you would like to raise?
Yeah, thank you. So, as you probably know, with Gorillas, we are basically building a new business. We're shaping a new industry, quick commerce, that is existing for 2 years. And the customers love it. And the perception that we have with our customers is great. But in, let's say, in a broader public perception, we're often considered as a company that in the end creates an additional layer of complexity to the transport infrastructure that is driven by fulfilling a luxury need, right? But that's the perception which is actually quite the opposite how we think about it. In our view, we are not only creating value to the customer, we are also creating value by streamlining the fulfillment of a need that the customers anyway have, right? So we did an analysis. I think 58% of the time that people go grocery shopping, they take the car. And this is a waste in the system that we want to address. And the biggest challenge that we have, to come back to your question, is the perception and the openness from the different stakeholders to jointly work with us to drive this end-to-end optimization in the last mile flow. Yeah? So public authorities, manufacturers, I'm very much looking forward to the discussion. So I would put it like this.
Yeah. Before we speak with the manufacturers, maybe let's give the word to Sebastian. What is your view on the pain points and also the challenges?
Yeah, I think many of the pain points are written there, and you mentioned them as well. So our business model is obviously a bit different than Gorillas. Our business model basically is, or the main challenge we face are simply the volumes. The parcel volumes we simply just have to deliver. So basically solutions like drones, trikes, bicycles, etc. are usable to a certain extent. We can use them, but they will not be sufficient. So we need solutions by which we can enter the last mile and enter cities also with adequately large volumes. So we're talking about parking zones, we're talking about Packstationen, which we have built as Deutsche Post. And this is obviously in conflict at certain times or in certain instances with cities kind of blocking larger vehicles from entering. So I think you mentioned different stakeholders need to work together. That's exactly also my view on that. We, to be able to perform our business model in a way we do it, with also acceptable wages, salaries, and full-time jobs, we need an efficient way of doing it, and that's let's say at risk in the next years.
And now that we have Andreas and Tom on the stage, what would be your wish to the OEMs, which makes your life way easier going forward?
So I think we have to differentiate. I think on the lower scale vehicles, so we call them Verbundzustellung, so the smaller parcels, like the Mercedes Vito, to just name one model. I think here we see quite some offering in the market. What is concerning us more is the development of the larger vehicles and electric vehicles, obviously. So there are some players working on that, but I think this in the next years will be challenging and interesting, which players will enter the market. I think for us it's always important we have some specific requirements. For example, the loading dock socket in the cars or the shelves in the vehicles. Our processes are kind of very structured and very standardized, so that's why we need to, and that would be my wish, work closely together when developing new models so that they fit our processes best.
Mm. So Andreas, can you? Yeah.
Maybe I can just answer to that. Yeah, so you know that we've been a very reliable partner for decades now for the delivery industry. And we will also be that in the future. I mean, you know that, you said it, Verbundzustellung, you know, smaller vehicles, they will be electrified. You can see us as an OEM fully electrifying our portfolio, but also offering tailor-made solutions, upfitting solutions. You can see it on our booth here also at the fairground, where we say, okay, what does the customer really need? Yeah? And we know the specific requirements, of course, of DHL. We've been partners for years. So we will fully electrify our portfolio, but I also see another point which I think will become important. You said it before, we might see, you know, inner city restrictions, especially large trucks banned from driving into the city. So as you know, with our strategy at Volkswagen Commercial Vehicles, we are also responsible for autonomous driving solutions, autonomous transportation solutions. So I see also a big impact there, which we can make when we say, for example, large trucks can only drive to the suburbs, and then you have a large hub here, and then you have standardized routes which can be driven autonomously, and then you have smaller hubs, in the city, and then the ultra last mile. That is something we need to discuss, but that's going to be a whole ecosystem of solutions.
Mm-hmm. And Tom, how would you answer the request from Sebastian?
Yeah, I think similarly. So I'm with Arrival. For anybody who is unfamiliar with us, we're a startup, relatively young company focused on developing commercial electric vehicles. Our first product is a last mile delivery van that we've developed in partnership with UPS. In the last talk, Peter was here from UPS describing that vehicle. For anybody who's here, we have the vehicle over in Unit 13, if you'd like to go and take a look. And we firmly believe that the best way to meet the requirements is through a deep partnership such as that. We've been working together for now about 4 years to really understand what are the full set of requirements that can make the product as efficient and usable as possible for not only the driver, of course, who's paramount to that, but also the operator, and also for just other stakeholders within the city who are interacting with the vehicle. So there's an awful lot that we've learned through that partnership and through that process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And regarding the volumes, because you mentioned there's also a need not only for a new type of vehicles, but also for a higher volume of vehicles. No? So will the OEMs be able to deliver that volume up to the magnitude as it's needed by the fleets and by the markets?
Well, generally, yes. We will be able, but of course, now we are impacted right now by semiconductor shortage. We are impacted by the war in Ukraine. And we were impacted by Corona, by lockdowns in China. So that, of course, has given us quite a long order book. So we're right now taking up speed again. We see a positive outlook for the rest of the year, for next year too. So we are where we want to be. But yes, of course, we want to deliver more vehicles. And of course, as said by you, we will also, of course, we've electrified the e-Crafter in 2018, so we were really some of the first ones, and we will do that, and throughout our whole portfolio. And you said 60% 2030. That's exactly what we've written down in our strategy. We say 55%. I know that's pretty close to 60. Mm-hmm. is what we are aiming for at 2030. So we are on that path to decarbonization and electrification.
A key lever will also be efficiency. As we've seen, the demand for higher demand for e-commerce does not translate one-on-one into the number of vehicles. But Jen, what is your view on efficiency and what needs to change to also reduce congestion?
Sure. So for those not familiar with What 3 Words, what we're doing is introducing a new addressing standard. And I think you mentioned the point earlier around the ultra last mile. So I think when it comes to last mile, what we're really thinking about is those last 3 meters, because for us, What 3 Words allows you to communicate those really precise locations. So that 3 meter by 3 meter square using a 3-word address. And I think it's relevant kind of to all of these different use cases that we're talking about, whether it's the vehicles themselves, and also the carrier companies, because how we're used and how the conversations we're often having with the carriers themselves is around those efficiency gains that can be achieved using very accurate locations for those deliveries. And those efficiency gains relate to time and distance traveled, which for the carriers themselves, and ultimately getting, I see people and goods on the move. I think that's often how I talk about things, how we're getting people and goods to exactly where they need to be. Those efficiency gains achieved in the last mile and even in those last few meters can make all the difference for the delivery companies themselves and ultimately the customers that they're serving.
Mm-hmm. So, we spoke about different modes of transportation. We touched them. Sebastian, you also touched drones, for example. Which types of transport and which types of modes do you believe will persist and will also gain in the future? So how will the future last mile actually look like besides LCVs? Is there a specific view? Maybe Clemens, I'll start with you.
I mean, currently we are using electrical bikes, cargo bikes, for the very last mile. And we believe that this is a solution that is really good. And we believe that it will remain the best solution for at least a number of years. I mean, in the far future, who knows? But we will we are really believing in the bike, but I mean, as you also said, right, it needs to be an ecosystem and a multi-mode approach, right? So I mean, for us, I can only confirm, big challenge is how to get the goods into our warehouses, into the dark stores, right? So it's, and there we need, in the end, we need electrical trucks of different sizes, and I think it's this combination that will be the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and maybe Tom, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, you know, to build on what was said previously, the demand that we see for the product is incredibly high right now, and I think for the delivery van that we're developing right now, and going into production this year with, it's we're now at well over 100,000 LOIs, non-binding LOIs that we have with partners and customers for that vehicle. So the demand far outweighs our supply capacity right now. So the strength of demand around that particular product is pretty clear. I also agree, however, that ultimately it will require an ecosystem of different products. Even just seeing some of the solutions on display here, you know, it's really fascinating to see, for example, the e-cargo bike innovation that's going on. That trend, I think, is going to be only continuing. That really feels like it's got an important role to play, particularly in urban areas that are more congested, as we see, you know, across Europe, or not necessarily even just congested with other road users, but just infrastructure and streets that are more difficult to navigate and get around. So I think that can have an important role to play. But from our perspective, at least, what we see is the product that we're offering of a 4.25 ton delivery van, plus a larger version of that is, you know, that's very clearly where there's a lot of demand from logistics providers right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the future is sustainable, and as you say, it's a combination, very probably, you know, between LCVs, cargo bikes, electric cargo bikes, and potentially other modes. Like, what do you think is the fastest way, you know, to decarbonize? So is this the best way we are going? Sebastian, from the fleet perspective, what would be your angle on how to increase even the decarbonization of the overall chain?
Well, firstly, I also think there's not one way leading to that. It will be a mixture. So we are actually using that already, a mix of bikes, trikes for more inner city deliveries, and electric vehicles for the suburban and rural areas. So I think we need to continue this path. So frankly, I think it will be interesting to see how the infrastructure is coping and keeping up the pace we do. So I think the vehicles as such are not so much the problem, I do see. So I hear from you also, I mean, there's a lot of investment and research going on. What I see more as a challenge is infrastructure, loading infrastructure, electric one. We're also talking about gas trucks. We have some difficulties, for example, in finding infrastructure for fueling, gas fueling. So I think the way we are embracing upon on electrification of the vehicles, maybe bridging technologies like gas, I think that's without alternative. But I think what will be challenging and what needs to be done in parallel is to build up and ensure the infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's...
And in terms of sustainability, there's also a second angle on sustainability, also economic sustainability, of course, of the business model. Now we have the luxury to have startups and established players here. So who do you think will win the race, no, going forward? So will this, we've also seen the investments into startups, no, the figure base. Like, what is your perspective on, will they coexist, or will one of the two typically win? Andreas, maybe if you...
Yeah. I've mentioned it before, so I don't think there will be the one solution, the one player making the game or winning the game in the end. We will see different modes of transportation, and that's also how we approach that. So we as an OEM now, we're also in a transformation, and we're not approaching that issue in terms of transportation as a vehicle, but really transportation as a service, and, you know, really look at the whole value chain and see what good we can do there. And you know that we are on our way to, in 25, to see autonomously driven vehicles in Hamburg for passenger transportation, so the next step towards transportation of goods. is not that far. So that is, of course, what we're looking at. I mentioned an example how that could work before, where we see like maybe standardized routes, and the ultra last mile, I think, is going to be a challenge. I agree with what Clemens said. The cargo bike for Gorillas will work for the next couple of years, I'm sure. But of course, we're also looking into that, because we also see like maybe standardized deliveries can also be brought to your doorstep. You can directly access the vehicle. So I think there will be a mix, and there will not be the one player winning the game, but we want to play a part in it, absolutely.
Yeah. And Tom, handing over to you.
Well, first of all, I guess as a startup, that's good to hear, Andreas. Nice to. I share that thought entirely, I would add. I think your introduction, Peter, has described it well. This is a transformational shift that we haven't seen for many, many generations, and there's going to be a huge amount of innovation and focus needed from across the entire industry to meet the goals. I mean, we're very familiar now in talking about the goals that cities and organizations have set, but delivering upon that is going to be enormously challenging. The timeframes are relatively short, and the upgrade and the change that's required is huge. So this is absolutely going to be a multi-OEM, multifaceted solution that's required for sure. I think the challenges that established OEMs and startups have are different, but probably significant in different ways. Of course, for us as a sort of 6 or 7 year old company producing our first product this year, it's about bringing to the market a product that delivers upon the requirements for the customer, and doing that reliably and doing that at the right rate and at the right quality level. So this is something that, of course, established players like VW and Andreas are familiar with and have got a lot of experience with, and we're going through the process of establishing that now. So I think our challenges are going to be different, but ultimately this is going to be something that there's so much demand for, as we were saying earlier, that it will absolutely be something that many organizations will play a part in.
And then, Jen, looking at what 3 words, like how do you foresee like the role also of what 3 words for in the future ecosystem that we are describing and shaping in our mind? Huh?
It's interesting. I think hearing people talking and from the conversations I have, I think partnerships and collaboration is really important. And I think what I often see is this more established players working with those startups, working with those cargo bikes to achieve the things that maybe they can't do right now in cities. Especially I know in the UK there are a lot of restrictions now on the types of vehicle that can operate within certain city limits. So working with new innovative electric first vehicles that can deliver on that promise, and working with them as you work to meet your own objectives and goals when it comes to the sustainability. And I think what 3 words has, I have the luxury of sitting across all of our partners and working with everyone right up through from the cargo bikes right up to the giants such as DHL and DPD in the UK. And I think the challenges are very similar across all of them. And I think ultimately it's about how do we achieve and get to where the customer is and what the customer wants. And I think those demands and expectations of customers are only ever increasing. And I think we've seen that over the last couple of years, that those expectations continue to increase, whether that's the speed at which they want something and the accessibility at which they want those goods. And I think it's the ability of all of these different players to work together to achieve that as well. And what 3 words kind of has the beauty of sitting across it as a standard. We're here to be used regardless of size or scale of that business. It's really just about how do we help get those things to where they need to be.
Yeah. And then Clemens, maybe looking at you at also the future role at the ecosystem. So like we looked at the vehicle manufacturer side with startups, but also looking at the operating side and the fleet operating side. Like how do you envision your future role in the ecosystem that shapes?
So on the Can you?
Yeah. How do you envision like your future role, the role of Gorilla in the future ecosystem that is currently shaping?
I mean, we will always be, so to say, a consumer of vehicles, a user of vehicles, right? We are in the end the interface to the customers, to the consumers, and we are. I would formulate it in a way that our job is to really understand and to really figure out what consumers really want, and to understand what are the real needs, what are the things that they want to have, the things that they need to do. Yeah? So shopping is on the one hand fun for a lot of people, on the other hand for other people it's a must do. And our job is in the end to understand the consumers, to translate it into an offering, and then to pass on the demand to the players like Volkswagen to provide the solutions to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I was maybe looking at the Deutsche Post, Sebastian. How do you think, like the big fleet operator needs to change going forward, to fulfill the requirements from the customer side, but also from the regulatory side?
Well, I think here again we need to differentiate a bit. I think between companies, fleet or let's say logistic companies focused on specific goods, and logistic companies more generalized, which Deutsche Post is one of them, on the postal and parcel services. And abstracting also from Deutsche Post and more generalizing it, I think here, I mean, our services will be still crucial, obviously, for, let's say, our economy as a whole. I mean, we are, let's say, basically providing the ongoing flow of documents and parcels, etc. We are supporting all this e-commerce shift in the economy overall. So here, again, I think I'm not talking about only Deutsche Post, but as such, but also on the industry itself, we are still playing a crucial role, obviously. I think there will be not economic model only operating with niche solutions. We need a sustainable way of transporting, let's say, at large scale volumes, documents and parcels in an efficient way, as I said at the beginning, and I'm kind of re-emphasizing this. And this is also our requirement and our wish towards, let's say, government and other partners. With all the discussion about sustainability, let's say, cities with less traffic, less congestion, etc., we should not forget our role, and let's say that we are kind of the, say, nerve system of the economy. And here we need solutions when they cannot consist of niche solutions, specific solutions like drones, like tramways, trains, etc. We need a model which we can operate. Mm. So again, not talking about our company, but on the industry as a whole.
Yeah. And what do you foresee, like, as let's say the major change, the one big change that's going to happen over the next 2 to 3 years, looking at not into the far future, but really into the next 2 or 3 years? Maybe Andreas, starting with you.
Happy to start. Yeah. So first of all, I think we will see an ongoing trend and really shift to decarbonization, electrification. Taking emissions out of the city, taking also noise out of the city. I mean, let's be honest. If a bus passes here which is electrified, it's just less noise. So I think just to make the city really more livable again for people that are living in there. Second major trend, if we look a little bit further, is really what I said before, looking at autonomous transport solutions, because I think that will really also play a major role when you think of congestion. Like things could be delivered at night. You don't need a driver. Vehicle is driving itself. You don't need to stick to driving hours, so you can really get sort of the goods that need to be into the city. You said it, it's a nervous system. The cities can't live without delivering goods in there, but do it in a sustainable way, do it autonomously, and so you can also really solve problems for the city. So that is, I think, the two major changes we will see in the next 2 or 3 years.
Maybe addressing that point specifically to Clemens and to Sebastian, what is your perspective on autonomous driving? So how far will that be in addition to your business model and, of course, make life easier?
At the moment, we are really convinced that our current approach with bicycles, with traditional electrical bicycles, with riders, is the one to go for that lane from our micro-fulfillment centers to the customers, because we also believe in the customer interaction. I think the more interesting aspect for us is bringing the goods into the micro-fulfillment centers. And I mean, we would be happy about any improvements there. I think you can tell us what's the realistic expectation. But I mean, there we are very, very open to that. On the very last mile, we are a bit skeptical that it will work fast.
Mm-hmm. Sebastian,
I would share that view. I think we are also open. I think there are cases, or let's say part of the transport lane for which this can be a viable solution. But I'm also reluctant, as you said, for the very last mile. We still need, I hardly see it working in all aspects, to put it this way. So I think one area to be looked into, but I think it's not at least a midterm solution for all aspects.
Yeah, because typically you still have the handshake now, the handover of the parcel and the good in the last mile. That needs to be solved now, but
I think, yeah, especially when anything's automated and you kind of lose the aspect of a human or a delivery driver. You know, often when we're talking to autonomous vehicle providers or technology suppliers, that focus on actually the accuracy of the location becomes even more important. And again, that's where we're kind of sitting in that whole ecosystem, is how do you, when you're introducing these solutions that might be more on the autonomous side, how do you ensure that accuracy when you don't have a delivery driver that's able to pick up the phone at the end of the day and talk to a customer? So.
Yeah. And then continuing with you, what would be your, when you look into the future, 2 to 4 years, what would be the most relevant change? Like when we see next time at IAA, for example? I
think it's interesting because, you know, addresses have been around for hundreds of years, and locations have, you know, we all talk about location, it's fundamental to our life, and I think it's still so important that we get that right, and what we're doing here and what we're trying to do is make it as easy as possible to talk about those precise locations. And I think as much as location and addressing isn't necessarily a new trend, I think the importance for partners like everyone on this stage and people who are using those kinds of technologies appreciate the importance of accurate locations, so kind of continuing on that and banging that drum.
And then, Tom, what would be your perspective for the next 2 to 4 years?
I think there's maybe a couple of things to add. One, I think, is the provision and use of data with logistics providers. I can see, you know, the vehicle that we're developing, for example, has the ability to monitor independently every component within the vehicle, to understand the status, the health, to predict servicing requirements and upgrade, as well as, you know, sensors, cameras across the vehicle as well. I think when we start to trial that vehicle and grow the fleet with UPS and other providers, we'll really then only start to see how powerful and how effective that can be. So I think that is a really exciting new area for partnership and collaboration, and the opportunities are enormous. Related to that, I think there's a really interesting angle around servicing and just efficiency improvements with more customization of the product. To give you one example, the vehicle that we have can unlock automatically with a remote proximity key, and the impact that can have to a driver once is maybe 2 or 3 seconds. But when you multiply that over hundreds of deliveries a day, tens or hundreds of thousands of vehicles in a fleet, and you know, every day of the year, the impact to a logistics provider is absolutely enormous in saved time and the efficiency gains. So that's just one small example with the product, and there are many of those that can be improved. So I think we'll see increased customizations for the specific use of the product that could cumulatively have a high impact. Again, I think that's just something that we will learn and adapt together as suppliers and customers can design and develop those kind of improvements in.
Yeah, and now Andreas, maybe because maybe you might want to add on the perspective of sensors and analytics in the vehicle from the Volkswagen perspective.
Yeah, honestly, I cannot agree more. Yeah, it's of course, as soon as you get to put sensors into the vehicle and you take, you gather data, you of course want to use it in order to optimize all the processes in between. Yeah, so I could not agree more. It's also something we're going into. Yeah, so we are already today offering mobile online services for fleets that are right now still, of course, driven by human beings. But in the future, of course, I mean, when you're driving autonomously, you're gathering just, we're really like packing it full of sensors. Yeah, it's packed. So of course, we are also gathering a lot of data, and we want to use that. And so I could not agree more.
Yeah, super. And Clemens, your view on the next 2 to 4 years?
I mean, I echo everything that I heard. I think it's great, like emissions, reducing emissions is also for us a big topic. I mean, if I look at it from the consumer perspective, the great thing which we see is a huge diversity in solution, and ultimately for the consumer that gives the opportunity to have more time, and in the end to spend the time on what really matters, right? So we are much more flexible, we are more efficient. So I think this is the great benefit that we will see in the next 2 to 4 years, enabled by all of that.
Yeah. And Sebastian?
Yeah, I also kind of share all the views mentioned. I think we, as a company, we are, let's say, pursuing our electrification and decarbonization path over the next years. So I think here we will see also some big changes. I think the next 2 years will also be a kind of litmus test, so to say, for the viability at least of some processes or solutions. And I also think we see it now with the macroeconomic solution that we face partially a hard time in some areas. Just one topic not mentioned here so far is workshops. So our maintenance and repair is also impacted by COVID, impacted by lack of labor supply, etc. So I think these trends will continue over the next years and not make life much easier on this side. I think we get new solutions, customized solutions. I'm happy to hear that. But on the infrastructure, let's say, side, we will face some challenges. So I think in 2 to 3 years from now, we'll be hopefully wiser on some areas and see also which parts we need to, let's say, adjust or fix.
Yeah, maybe I can just quickly add up to what Sebastian, also Thomas said. Yeah, we're all talking about what happens in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and we all have visions on that. But I think it's really important that every company just sets clear goals, delivers on what we say here, delivers proof points, as you said, Sebastian. Because you've seen the rise in parcels, you've seen the rise in vehicles driving into the city, and we want to solve that problem. We know we need to deliver. That's, I think, valid for all of us.
Yeah. So the good thing is that we saved a bit of time at the end to open up for questions, also from our audience. So let's see, we have about 5-6 minutes left. Let's see who in the audience is having a question to one of our panelists. Yeah, there's a question.
Hello, everyone. I'm Yongji Zhou from Ocado. I think this question is mainly to maybe Peter. You talk a little bit less. So you are from Boston, BCG, right? So you guys talk about a lot of autonomous mobility for last mile. And in this industry, there are a lot of players. And in some of the slides, it also shows Nuro, a picture of Nuro, which is also an autonomous player in the US. What's your view on different players or on different marketplace? What's their challenge and advantage in different marketplace? For example, US, European countries, UK. Is there any? Do you have any views on this? Thank you.
Maybe I can actually give a first answer and then please add. So, I mean, as you said, there's lots of, as we showed earlier, there's lots of activities around development of autonomous driving vehicles, also on the last mile delivery side, delivery robots, and so on. I think one of the key challenges is also, as we discussed on the stage earlier, like how is the handover of the parcel or the pizza, whatever it is, actually done to the customer, to the end customer. So there's very often still a handshake needed to do the final handover. So, and in terms of development of technology, I mean, when we look at the US, when we look at China, and when we look at, for example, Europe, we see the US and China being a bit more at the forefront of technology development, and Europe lagging a bit behind, also in terms of adoption of autonomous solutions, both outside the city and also inside the city. But we expect those solutions to be on the roads towards the end of the decade. So when we speak of 28, 29 until 30, then we foresee a certain share of vehicles being autonomous also in the inside. And I think, like one of you also said, it will be, I think Andreas was you, it will be first of all like people mobility, where we have people shuttles driving around, but then of course it will also be for specific goods, maybe driving the goods to special storage places where people can collect and so on. So that's maybe a first answer to your question, but happy to open for the panelists.
Just a quick remark on it. So I don't think there will be the one global solution which fits for every market, every city, every region. Yeah. So we will, of course, see different solutions. It's different delivering a package in the Midwest in the US than delivering it, I don't know, in Bangkok. Yeah. So we will have different solutions. But I think the general approach of how you're getting goods into a city, and then from the hub in the city to the customer, the general question, the general approach will be very much the same. But yes, of course, we will see different solutions in different markets.
Pick up on the point in regard to autonomous. I think one area that is particularly interesting is the use of autonomous vehicles within the depot, within a closed environment, which perhaps is something you're familiar with at Ocado, I suspect. But to give an example of UPS, for example, that's you can imagine a vehicle that is driven by a driver when it's out on the street for all of the reasons that are obvious. It needs somebody for that handover of the package, but also it's a very, very complex environment to navigate autonomously. Whereas within a depot, you could imagine a driver getting out of the vehicle and it autonomously driving for recharging, for cleaning, and for repackaging, refilling the vehicle with packages ready for the next set of deliveries. And actually, for fleet operators, that can be quite a complex point in the process, and it can be the time when the vehicle can receive many sort of bumps and scrapes and that then need to be rectified. It may be that the vehicle needs to be repainted or touched up or polished, for example. And therefore, there's actually a really interesting angle in regards to autonomous for that part of the end-to-end process. And of course, it enables a different use case from a policy and legislative perspective as well, where autonomous has obviously got some room to go from that angle, whilst all cities and legislators are looking very carefully at autonomous. There is clearly some more work needed there, but within a closed environment such as a depot, that can be really interesting. So that's something that we're looking at with our products. How can we offer that as a solution that you could then have something which is fully drivable, fully optimized around a delivery driver, but also enables that autonomous point in the process as well.
I think we have time for one or two more questions. Yeah.
Thank you. My question goes to Andreas and Tom. I would like to know your view. How do you expect or forecast the role of hydrogen in your autos?
Yeah. So, general, what we're talking about here, really last mile challenge, that will be battery electric. That's our view on it. Hydrogen might be a solution for big trucks, for long haul, for high loads, really like long mileages. But for what we're talking about here, we are looking into a full electrification, because it's also really the best. You have the least loss of energy. When you're talking about sustainably produced electricity that you're then getting into an electric engine, that's just, when you look at it from an overall perspective, that is, you have the least, really, loss of energy on that chain. Yeah. So, sorry, Tom.
I agree. Yeah, agree fully. I think this is certainly the technology around battery electric vehicles is also, of course, much closer and much more available, and this is a solution, going back to what we've discussed a little bit here, that's needed right now. So it makes sense from that perspective as well.
Yeah. Maybe adding to that as a final remark, I think in the field of long-haul commercial vehicles, so medium and heavy-duty trucks, there's also several hydrogen solutions now being shown here at IAA, and that's potentially the field where there is also a use case and application, specifically when it comes to faster recharging than what you see for battery electric vehicles. But then for this typical use cases in the last mile, where you are able to recharge, for example, in the depot overnight. I mean, I fully agree with that, what you say. Also in terms of energy efficiency utilization, it's more efficient to use battery electric vehicles. So I think we have run out of time. So thank you very much, first of all, to the panelists for this great and insightful discussion. Thank you very much to the audience today. Enjoy IAA. Take care and goodbye.
Our panelists, we are going to take a quick lunch break. We will see you back here in 1 hour if you're on the live stream. See you in 60 minutes. You guys, I hope you'll stick around, or I'll see you very soon. Thanks, guys.